Okay, so we're going to get started with this month's training webinar. I'm Angelina Jacobs. I'm a CRM consultant with CRM Dynamics located in Mississauga, Ontario. I do these webinars every third Thursday of the month. Again, I always say if you have questions or comments afterwards, feel free to take down my email and send me a quick message. By all means, I'll answer what I can, or I'll send you in the right direction if you have any further CRM related questions. So by all means, take down my email address there, angelina.jacobs@crmdynamics.ca. So for today, we're actually going to be looking at data import and export within the CRM instance. And we're just going to be using the out-of-the-box data import wizard. You can actually get into some very complex data loading outside of that. But for this purpose, we're just going to show you how to use the built-in loader and as well as the best practices when you're loading data. We're also going to look at duplicate detection because this is something you want to be aware of as well as set up, especially when you're going to be importing and creating records within your CRM. So without further ado, I'm going to go right into our online CRM instance here. I'm using a Microsoft Online environment, and this one is 2016. So depending on the version you have, things might look a little different, but by all means the concept is the same. So again, if you have any questions because things aren't exactly where I said they would be, if you have a different version, just send me an email and we can answer that quickly. So here I'm just opening up into my main dashboard view. When you're importing data, there's quite a few ways that you can go about getting to that, so I'm going to show you a couple of them. The most direct one is when you go into the back end here, and I've shown this a lot in my videos, where you click on the lines here, you've got your modules, and you want to go into settings. So I'm going to click on settings. A lot of times we've been in the customization section, but for this one we're going to be dealing with data. So we're actually going to go into data management section here. So settings, data management. I have these options here. Again, I always mention that depending on the security settings that each user has and which security role they have, they might not see all of these menus and available options here. So just keep that in mind if you ever are trying this on your own system. If you can't see something, it's most likely a security role setting. And you can always contact your CRM administrator if you have any questions about that. So the first thing, as I mentioned with the data importing, we do want to think about the duplicate detection rules we have in place. So a lot of times the system will come with some default ones, but we can actually create our own. So you'll see here I have these duplicate detection rules right here. So I'm going to click on that. You'll see here it says create, modify, and publish duplicate detection rules. So that's what I want to do first. So there's already some here that were created. Anything that says unpublished means it's not actually active. So even if it was created, it's not actually in play, so it actually won't do anything. Anything that's published is an active rule. So you can actually look at any of the ones that are currently in your system. For this case, though, I'm going to show you how to create a brand new one. So of course, we're going to click on New. And you see here I'll have to give it a name. I'll make this a bit bigger so you guys can see the screen. So this one I'm just going to say this is going to be for accounts. And I don't want to create any duplicate accounts that have both the same name as well as the same account number, because most likely it's the same business. So I'm going to call this accounts with same name and account number. And these are things you kind of have to think of in advance when you're thinking about uploading your data and having these duplicate detection rules, but I'm just showing you how to go about it. So I've got my name, my base record type. So I'm actually going to base this on the entity, is what we call it, of accounts. You can select whether it's case sensitive or not. So that means if you had, two names that are exact same, but one has a few, capital letters versus not, that's where you'd want to say whether that's actually a big deal or not. So I'm going to actually leave that unselected. You can also have the option to exclude inactive matching records because sometimes in your CRM you might deactivate a record versus just deleting it. So it technically still exists, it's just not an active record, so that's another option you have available. Down here is where I'm going to create my actual filter for how I'm going to tell them what duplicate means to me. So the first thing is I'm going to select the field. Now it's going to give me all the fields that are available from within this account entity that I selected. So first thing is going to be account name. So I select that. The criteria here, you have a few options. So exact match, pretty self-explanatory. If the account name is the exact same, that's going to match to this. You can also say same first characters, same last characters, and then you can set how many. So that's just maybe if you think, you know, someone has a name and you want to, if anything is the same 5 first letters, that's where you'd put this stuff in. For the accounts though, usually you just go exact match, and then you can ignore blank values as well. That's just if there wasn't any data in that field. The other thing I'm going to do is account number. The reason I do this is sometimes you might have companies with the same name, but they're actually, you know, different locations. They would have different account numbers. You know how there's a bunch of different, you know, let's say Home Depots or Lowe's companies, but you actually might have a different account number for each. So the account name won't be sufficient. You have to add yet another criteria. So I'm adding account number. And again, I'm going to select the same thing, exact match. So what I'm doing here is I'm saying no records can be created if there already is one that has the same account name and same account number. Okay, then I can just go save. You'll see down here, this is the administration side of which user created it, and then if anyone did modify it, so someone else came in here to modify it, you'd see that as well. Captures the dates as well. So now that I've saved it, I still have to publish this to activate it. So there's 2 ways I can do it. You can see up here I have that option. So I can just go publish. It's now going to say you're going to publish this rule. I'm going to go OK. And now you'll see I can't change anything. So I can't select any of these things because this is an active rule. If I did want to change it, I'd have to unpublish, do some changes, and then republish. So I'm going to close this now. And you'll see here in this list is that new duplicate detection rule that I just created. You can also select any of these. So see if I had this selected, I can also unpublish here as well as publish. So that's what I was just saying. There's different ways to go about the same thing. Same with this. This is an unpublished rule. If I wanted to publish it, I just would have to select and say publish. So I'm going to leave this one as the active one that I just did. So that's the first thing. We've thought about duplicate detection rules. So I'm going to go back to data management. I can just click up here. And you'll see there's this imports section. So this is one way to go about importing data into your system. So this will be the first one that I show you. Now before you go into importing your data, you have to make sure that it's actually in the right format and that it's how you want it to be organized. So for this session, I'm just going to do some simple imports of accounts and then imports of contacts. So you'll see here I have just a very simple Excel sheet. So I have headers up here, and these headers are what I'm going to actually match to fields within my CRM. So they're pretty easy here. You know, I've just got the address, account number, name, phone number, website. And then I've got this other, what I'm going to call more a specialized field, because I'm also going to show you that when you import data, you can create fields on the fly as well. So here's my account data. I am going to be importing contacts as well that I will then link to the proper companies. So with that in mind, you have to make sure that you're importing your data in the right order. So accounts will have to go first so that when I import the contacts, I can link them to existing records. So you can't do both at the same time, because if a contact is trying to be linked to a company and the company record doesn't exist in the CRM, it's going to fail. So just keep that in mind as well. You kind of have to follow the follow an order. So accounts first, and then then contacts, and then you can go into, importing opportunities, stuff like that you're going to link to existing records. Okay. So this is a file I have. I've saved it as an XML. I will show you at the end of this some of the additional notes in terms of what files are supported for this process. It also tells you in this wizard. So I'm going to click on imports. It's going to open up the import screen here, so I can actually see any of the imports that I've previously done as well as their status. I'm actually going to do a new one though, so you'll see at the top here I have import data. I'm going to click that, and this launches the wizard. So the first thing is I have to add a file, and you'll see here it notes the supported file types as well. In case it's not formatted properly, it will give you an error. So I'm just going to go browse. I'm going to select my accounts Excel sheet here. You also have the option to drag and drop. I'm going to go next. So it's just showing you what files you have here as well as the size. There are also limitations to the size, which I will show you afterwards. So now we're going to get to this data mapping section. You usually can just use your default mapping, which means the system will map what it can, and then it'll flag anything it doesn't know what to map to, and then you can map it yourself. I'll also show you that you can save any mappings that you do, and then they actually become options down here for you to select, so you don't have to keep remapping if you're going to be importing multiple files of the same type. So for now, I'm just going to select default automatic mapping. I'm going to go next. So here's the first thing. It's trying to ask me which entity am I going to map this to. So here's my source accounts, and then it says Microsoft Dynamics CRM record types. So this again is going to go to an account. I could actually create a new one if I wanted to, but the entity is already in here. So I'm just selecting the entity where these records are going to go. So account, I'm going to go next. And then here's where I'm actually going to map the fields within my source data, so my Excel file, to the CRM fields. And I always suggest, if this is the first time you're going through it, always check each one, even if the system has tried to map, because sometimes it will map to the wrong field. So you'll see here's my source field, so this is the headers within my Excel, and then these are the CRM ones. So it's just splitting up also if there's required fields on the form. So obviously account name is a required one. In my Excel sheet, that was actually under the company column, so that's the first one. The account was actually an account number. So see here it tried to map, but I'm actually going to change that. So there's an account number field within CRM. So I'm going to map that. And then these ones, it doesn't know what to do. That's why it's giving me this kind of error or alert sign. So this category code here was a special field that could be pertinent to my company. So this doesn't exist yet in the CRM. So I can actually create a brand new field on the fly. So I drop down here, I can ignore this, or I've got this option to create new field. So I'm actually going to create a brand new one. So create new field, I can label it. So I'm actually going to call this category code. Depending on your business and what type of records you're importing, you might have a lot of customized fields, so you'll be creating them. And then I can pick the field type. So for this one, I'm actually going to create an option set because these are just standard numbers that we use or would assign to a specific company. So I'm going to go option set, and then you'll see it gives me all the options so far that are in my source data, and then it's telling me it's going to create those same ones as an option set or a pick list in the CRM. So I'm going to go OK, and continue mapping. So city, any address fields within CRM, you'll know that they have kind of this address 1. They also have address 2, and then you can also create custom address fields. But just so you know, that's why it doesn't map as easily. So I'm going to pick address 1, city. Phone number, there's probably about 3 or 4 different phone number fields within CRM by default. There's, main phone, business phone, there's fax number, all that. So just make sure you're putting it in the right one that you think is going to be on your form. You can also always change that later. Let's say you import it to the wrong phone field, you can then just add that phone field to the form instead of another one. So for this one, accounts have a main phone number. So you'll see here I just pressed M. Sorry, not that you'll see I pressed M, but I pressed M, and that's why it jumped to this menu here. So I'm going to click main phone. Postal code, same thing, it's going to be in the address section here. So I'm actually going to pick address 1, zip or postal code. Province, same thing, I'm going to pick on state or province. And these are just the out-of-the-box fields within CRM. Street. You have a couple options for this one. It does allow you to have up to 3 street lines. For this, I already know my data is just the one, so I'm going to pick street 1. But you could, let's say you had multiple address fields, like if they had a PO box or anything like that, you could actually add that then to street 2. You'll see here it already mapped automatically website to website, same label, so that's good for me. And then we can go next. It's just kind of reminding me what I'm mapping to what. I could also go back. Let's say I forgot something. If you click edit, it just brings me back to this screen where I'm mapping everything. So you can just do kind of a double check. Okay, I've done everything here. Next again. Finally, you're going to get this option here before it does the import of allowing duplicates or not. Usually you want to not allow duplicates, so what happens is this is where the duplicate detection rule comes into play. If you wanted to override that, you would click yes and then allow any duplicates. I'm going to leave it as no. You can also select the owner for the imported records, so let's say these are my accounts. I'm obviously going to leave this as myself, but if you had the security rights to create records for other people, you could do that as well for, let's say you were importing other salespeople's data, you could then select them as the owner of the records. Here's where you can actually save your mapping so that you don't have to go through the mapping of the fields every time. So I could actually just label this accounts, and then it's going to save it for any future imports of mine. I'm going to go submit. And depending on how many records you do import, it can take some time. Obviously, in this case, I'm only importing about 5, but some people will import thousands of them, so that will take time. So while this is being submitted, I'm just going to look at some of the questions because someone did have a good question asking about a Automatch functionality. So there are a couple things that you can do is to format your Excel file so that the headers or the columns match the field labels within your CRM. So that's one way to go about it so that you don't have to go through and map a bunch of fields. Let's say if you have 100 new ones. I will also show the option of exporting a template so that it already has the headers or the field labels within the CRM, and then you just have to add your data to that. So I will show you that as well, and that's a good way to then decrease the time that it takes to map all the fields. Okay, so this one's saying it's been submitted for import. I can click finish. I can also go to my imports, check the status of that. So you'll see here I only had 6 records I was importing, and I did put a little curveball in there so you could see the duplicate detection rules into play. So it did complete pretty quick for only 6 records, right? But you'll see here the total processed records is 6, so I had 6 in there. And I'll show you, here's my Excel sheet, so I did have the 6 records. Saying though that there was one that was an error, but I had 5 successes. That means there's 5 records I created, but something went wrong and it failed to be created. Now I can check the status of this by just double clicking. It'll open it up. It'll give me the information, like when I started this, where I was importing it to, how many records were created, failures, and so forth. Then you'll see on the left side here, it's got a failures section, so I know one failed, and I can actually check why. And you'll see here, it gives me a description. Sometimes you just have to open up these headings to see the whole thing. So this says a record was not created or updated because a duplicate of the current record already exists. It'll also show me which row that was in, so the 7th one, and it shows me the information as well as additional details saying, was not created because of duplicate. So I can actually go into my file, look at the 7th row, and you'll see here, this wasn't created. And that's because I copied a company that's already within my CRM. So when I tried to upload it again, that duplicate detection rule that we created said, okay, there's already a record that has this account and has this company name, so I'm going to skip it and not going to import it. So I kind of threw that in just to show you what happens when the duplicate detection rules come into play. And I can always go back now and check my accounts. So if I go into sales and go accounts, and I'll show you right here. So here's the one that was already created, the Coho Winery. And then see how it had the account number. So that's why it didn't create that and it errored out. All right, so I'm going to show you a second way to go about importing data, and this time it's going to be with contacts. So I'm going to go into the actual contacts entity instead of going into settings and data management. And then depending on how much information is on this top ribbon, sometimes you'll have the option here where it says import data. If you don't see that, sometimes it's hidden within this additional command menu, and it'll be a list here. So if you don't always see it up here, like they are export and import buttons, you might see it just in this 3 dots. It'll have additional menu options. So here's another way that we can import data. So clicking that, again, opens the same import wizard. Again, I can browse from my file. This one, I'm going to do contacts. And I will show you as well, here's my Excel file, just a couple contacts here. I've just got first name, last name, which company they belong to, phone number, and an email. So pretty basic. So again, I'm going to go next. And you'll see here, again, I have this default automatic mapping, but I just want to show you under this customized data maps, you'll see here's the one that I saved when we did the accounts. So let's say you had saved ones, they would be under here and you could select them. So that way you don't have to redo any mapping that's already been done. So again, I'm just going to select where these, or what type of record types these are. So instead of accounts this time, I'm actually going to do contact. You always have to watch out, there's contact as well as contract within CRM. So sometimes that's an easy mistake to make. So just make sure you're importing the contacts if they're contacts, and then contracts if they're contracts. So I'm going to go next. And again, come up with the mapping details here. So you can see here, one of the required fields on the contact form is last name. Again, it already knew it was last name because it was labeled the same in my source file. And then I have account, company, email, first name, phone number. So email, you can see it already mapped as well as first name. Phone, again, there's going to be multiple phone number fields, so I can just choose which one I want. So you have, you have business phone. There's usually a mobile phone option in here, so mobile phone. For this one, I'm just going to select business phone right here. Now, I want to link these contacts with the company that they work for. And in my source file, I had both a company text field as well as the account number. So there's a couple ways you can go about this. I can either go account, and you'll see here, I'm going to link to the company. See how it says company name and it's a lookup? That means I'm linking it to an existing company record. So I can either do that using the account number or the company name. The reason you would want to stay away from company name is, again, same example where you might have multiple companies with the same name, but they're actually different accounts. So you have to keep that in mind, that if you do use the option to just map the company name, so if I was just like here using this company name to the existing company name, I could run into problems if I have multiple company records with the same name but perhaps a different account number. So usually we try to use a unique number or data field to do that mapping. So I'm actually going to ignore the company one because I don't want to map that way. So I'm going to select ignore, and I'm going to use the account, which is the account number, to map to the company name. And here's how you do that. So the first thing is I'm going to select company name, so company name lookup, and you'll see here I get I can select what type, or sorry, what field I'm looking up on. So for the account, you'll see here by default it goes to the account name, but I actually don't want to use that because I'm going to be using the unique field, which is the account number, to link. So first I select account, but if I click this box here, it's kind of like a search field, I'm going to unselect account name, meaning I'm not matching them based on the account name. I'm actually matching them based on the account number. So that's how you do that. So I select account number, I go OK, and then I press OK. So I'm using the account number in my contact source file, and I'm looking up to a company record, and in that company record I'm matching based on the account number field as well. And then that's how it will create that link of knowing where this contact works. And then I'm just going to ignore the company name because I don't need to map that. So I'm going to go next, and then next. Again, I can allow duplicates or not, so you can say yes or no. For the most part, unless you have very unique duplicate detection rules for contacts, you can sometimes you can sometimes create a duplicate detection rule that just says, the same first name, last name, and company can exist, but you don't want to just do first name, last name, because obviously there's a lot of people in the world and they might have the same name, so you don't want to have that as a duplicate detection rule. Again, I can select a different order if I wanted to, but these are going to be my records, and I can save this same mapping for future use and just call it contacts. So I'm going to go submit. And then if I wanted to check the status, here's where I can actually click that link for imports. And it's just going to pop open the page and show me that same list. So see here, it shows me that I had done an accounts one, and right now it's going through the process of importing my contacts. If I have this open on the right side, I can actually just click this refresh button, keep refreshing till it tells me it's done, and then you'll see here it went from transforming to completed. Again, I can see how many records were used. So there's 6. I've got an error on 1, so one thing didn't import, and then I've got 5 successes. So again, I'm going to open this up. I'm going to check why one of them failed. Again, I threw another curveball into here, and you'll see here it says when it was trying in this phase, it says the lookup reference could not be resolved. So that means when I was trying to link it to an account, it's telling me the account doesn't exist. So that's an error you could get. If the company account isn't in your CRM, it won't won't import this contact record because it actually doesn't know where it's linking to. So you'll see here, I'll open up my source file. I have this record here from this company, and this wasn't one of the companies that I created, and it's not in my CRM either. So it couldn't create this contact because it didn't know, or it failed when it tried to look up to a specific company because the company's not there. Okay, so that's another type of error you can get when importing data. So I'm just going to go finish. And you'll see here it already refreshed my contact list with all those new contacts that I imported. And you'll see I'll open up Chris Roberts here. So it imported all the information that I brought in. So it's got the full name, so first name and last name. See here, first name, last name. It's got the email, it's got the business phone, and you'll see here this account name. Sorry, this account name actually shows the company name, but remember we looked it up based on the account number, but it still will show the company name because that's the name of the record. If I clicked on this, I could actually open up the company. Oops. And then it would take me to Ski Zone, the company. And the nice thing too here is we have a subgrid on the account or company form that shows all the contacts linked to it, and there you go, you can already see the one that I imported as well. So that's the basics of importing data. The other thing you can do, so I said I would show you one way that you can have a template. So if I go back to contacts, so again, I don't have the import data button available on my ribbon. It's probably hiding in here. So down here, so instead of just selecting this off the bat, I'm going to select the arrow, and you'll see here there's an option to download the template for import. And what this will do, I'll click this, it's going to open up an Excel sheet, and it's going to have all the fields available to me. Sorry, it might be taking a bit of time to open up, but it's going to have all the fields available within the CRM, and then I can add my data to them. So someone was asking about, how can they kind of do an Automatch functionality, just so you can limit how much time you spend on mapping. This is the best way to do it using just the basic import wizard, because you'll see here it's already got the field label names, and the CRM knows what they map to. So I could put my data into here, you'd have to do some copy paste, and some of these you might not even use, which is fine. But you'll see here if I keep scrolling, it's got a bunch of fields that I can fill in if need be. I don't have to fill them all in, so you can leave them blank, it's no problem. But then when I go to re-import this file with the actual data in it, it will already know which fields from here map to which ones in the CRM, because it actually gave you all the names here. Now someone asked if there's a rollback functionality. There are a couple options when you import data in case you want to actually delete the records you imported. And where you do that, again, is in the data management section. So I'll go into settings, data management, and then I'm going to look at my imports. So if I select, let's say I was like, oh, I actually don't want to create these ones, I want to do some further revisions and then re-import, I can select this, and you'll see this delete up here has a few options. So I can either delete the source file, which doesn't roll back anything, but you can actually delete all records imported from this import. So if I selected this option, what it would do is any records, so any contact records I created when importing, they'd actually delete from my CRM. So that's one way to do it with here. So you can just delete the source file, but that keeps the records in your CRM, or you can actually delete all records that were created when you did the import. So that's kind of the rollback functionality you'd have from this. Now I did want to show you as well the option for exporting data, and you'll see here it's at the top. If it's not at the top, again, it's going to be in the additional menu. And you just have a couple options when you're exporting to Excel. So you can export a static worksheet or a dynamic. Now the difference between these two is a static worksheet is something you could play around with, and it wouldn't change anything in your CRM. So I could actually export these these accounts, and just do whatever I wanted to do with them within my Excel and leave it like that. I could still make changes and re-import if I wanted to. But with dynamic worksheets, what happens is, one, you have to have the Outlook client installed, and you'll actually see this, I think it pops up. So it warns you saying need the CRM for Outlook installed. And what that does is the dynamic worksheet is pretty much like a link. So the Excel sheet will reflect the data within your CRM. So if I opened it today, it would show me, what I have right now. But let's say someone did some changes in my CRM, and then I opened it the next day. If I had a dynamic worksheet, it should actually reflect those changes. So usually most people will stay away from dynamic worksheets because you could actually do some changes, and then it will actually change the records in your CRM too. So for the most part, we suggest using a static worksheet. And the nice thing with these two is if you did want to do maybe some major bulk editing, you can export a static worksheet, do a bunch of changes, and then re-import, and it will update the records with what you changed. Because when you're in CRM and you want to do a bulk edit, you can only do 250 records at a time. So something to keep in mind if you wanted to do a bulk edit, let's say on 1,000 or more records, it's probably best to do it, export in a static worksheet, and then do your changes there and then re-import. So I'll show you, I just did an export of this view here. And it's pretty simple. It'll just, mine's running a security scan on the file, but it'll just open up in Excel and you'll have, the data from the view that you were in. So it means it's only going to have the columns from that view. So see here, I've got all this information here. If you wanted to export additional data, that's when the advanced find comes into play. So I can show you real quickly. We do have another webinar, a past webinar that we touched on advanced find. But the nice thing is with advanced find, you can add columns. So let's say I went to results. So however you do your advanced find and whatever columns or fields that you add into here, again, same thing, you can export and have the same options available to you. Now, if you are exporting to do some edits for re-import, you do have to keep in mind you can't change anything with the file itself, like you can't rename it and change what type of file type it is, as well as its location. So if you're going to make a bunch of bulk edits, you want to make sure that if you're going to download this, you want to save it to the folder. So instead of just going open, you'd go save as, save it to wherever you want to do this. So I can just pick desktop and then open it. You could do some changes. So let's say I just wanted to change, if I wanted to reassign this to one person, or I wanted to change instead of this being mine, I'd change it to another user. Sorry, I have to enable editing. I actually wanted to change it to Jan. I could do that. I would just then save this file, and then I could go through the same import process that I showed you previously, and it would know to update any records, and then if I created new ones, it would actually create new ones. And you'll see here one of the ways to know if it kind of has, a connection with CRM per se, is see how this starts on Excel, the column D. It's because there's these hidden fields. Oops. So if I unhide, you'll see here it's got these fields with numbers that, again, you'll see it labels them do not modify, so you don't want to touch these. But I'm just showing you that this is how it kind of, this is how the CRM knows which record it's actually updating. So I can make some changes, but you'll see here if I changed the owner of this record, it knows which record this is in the CRM because it has a unique identifier. So that's why these are hidden. No one should be playing around with these because then your import will just fail. But that's how, if you make some changes, if I save this, close it, save and close, and then I went to re-import, it would actually make the change that I had changed in the Excel sheet. Now, are there any other questions in terms of data importing and exporting? It can get pretty confusing, I know, and there are other options out there to handle more complex situations. But in terms of just using the out-of-the-box data import wizard, if there are any questions or clarifications you need, please do type them in the question box, and I'll do my best to answer them. Okay, now while you're doing that, I will just show you some additional notes that I promised I would give you. This is just to go over some of the file formats that are supported. So you'll see here, you can have CSV files, text files, XML, as well as the Excel workbook. You also can have compressed zip files. So this is what this would be if you had, let's say, multiple files that exceeded the maximum file allowance for, let's say, CSVs. So you could actually zip them all into one, or sorry, take the multiple CSV files and make a zip file, and then you actually have a little more room to play with. So you can actually do that as well. You'll see here the maximum file size for zip files is 32 megabytes, and then the other file formats is just an allowance of 8 megabytes. So that's an option to think about. You could actually zip a couple files and import that way. Also, I kind of hinted at this when you use the template or when you're doing the static Excel worksheet when you export it. If you add a new column to it or do any changes that way and try to re-import, it's actually going to fail. So let's say you export the template for import and you add a new column because you have data that's not in the CRM, it actually won't work. So you want to make sure all your fields are in this are created in the CRM first if you're going to go the route of exporting a template for data import. So just keep that in mind. Okay, and there's a question about automating imports. For this process, it is manual, so you do have to go about, submitting the data as well as going through that import wizard. That's not the only option you do have. There are other ways to go about this. It's just not out of the box dynamic CRM functionality. So a lot of times, companies like CRM Dynamics will actually create custom data loaders for you that are a lot more, or they provide automation in terms of, when things get uploaded, what the mappings are, how often it happens, how things updates. So all those things, or all that automation is possible. It's an additional functionality that you would have to have written for you or use additional tools besides the data import wizard. Now someone asked about rolling back updates. I'm assuming you refer like when they update the actual CRM itself. And it is possible. Microsoft, if you're hosted Microsoft Online, they most likely will not roll back. Oh, okay, so someone said updating records. Okay, sorry about that. So if you do some updates, it's not as easy to roll back from that. However, keep with that in mind, you can turn on auditing, which is new in, I'm not sure, 2013 and up, or at least 2015 and 2016. That's when you'd want to have auditing on, so at least you can then track changes. So let's say someone did update some stuff by accident. If auditing is on, you could actually at least have visibility of what was changed and then what the old value was, and then you could change it back. But that's why we say when you're doing anything with the imports, you kind of want to stay away from dynamic worksheets if any changes will be made, because that can happen. You can accidentally change stuff and then not know how to go back to the previous data. So by all means, make sure you have some auditing turned on, especially not on all fields, but on the most important fields if that's something of concern. I hope that answers your question there. Perfect. You're welcome. Now, someone asked about change files. I'm not quite sure what you're referring to, so if you're still on, if you want to just provide a little more detail, I can just send you a message about that, because I'm not quite sure what you're asking there. Hopefully I've answered all your questions. If not, I will be taking a look afterwards and I can send you any quick messages. But again, feel free to send me an email. It should be pretty good. Or sorry, I should be pretty good at answering them. Again, I want to thank you all for joining us this month. Again, next month we will be the third Thursday again in May. So by all means, please register for that. And I will look forward to seeing you guys there. Hope you guys have a very lovely day.